regime in Syria. As we pursue this program, the United States will continue to press for a political resolution to the Syrian conflict, resulting in an end of the Assad regime. Assad has lost all legitimacy to govern and has created the conditions that allow that ISIL and other terrorist groups to gain ground and terrorize and slaughter the Syrian population. The United States will not coordinate or cooperate with the Assad regime. We will continue to counter Assad through diplomatic and economic pressure. The administration apparently is now claiming that the rise to power of the ISIL is Assad's fault. This ignored the fact that it was the U.S. to aid the rebels fighting Assad, some of which were allied with ISIS, that enabled terror groups to grow strong enough to overrun a sizable portion of Iraq, as the New American reported on August 14th. U.S. officials admit that many of the weapons being used by the Islamic State terrorists to butcher Christians, Shias, and other Iraqis were actually paid by the U.S. taxpayers for being seized by the rampaging barbarians. Before that, other American weapons now in the hands of those terrorists were required in Syria, where the Obama administration and its allies were fomenting and supporting jihad in a half-baked plan to overthrow the anti-ISIS Assad dictatorship. Some analysts said even Obama has switched sides in the terror war. Unwilling to admit its responsibility in helping to arm ISIS, the administration would rather blame Assad, who replaced Saddam Hussein, as the Middle East scapegoat of the year. Hagel's remarks, quoted above, stated, "We believe that Iraq's new Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi, is committed to bringing all Iraqis together at ISIL. However, speaking to AP on September 17th, al-Abadi opposed the idea of the United States or other nations sending ground forces to Iraq to fight Islamic State militant, saying that foreign troops are out of the question. Not only is it necessary, he said, we don't want them, we don't allow them, full stop. The only contribution of American forces or the international coalition is going to help us from the sky, al-Abadi said. We are not giving any blank check to the international coalition to hit any target in Iraq. Interesting. While the United States has ruled out any cooperation with Syria's Assad in fighting the ISIS, al-Abadi did not seem to regard Assad as the boogeyman that the United States does. We cannot afford to fight our neighbor, even if we disagree on many things, he said. We don't want to enter into problems with them. For us, sovereignty of Syria is very important. One of the most outspoken opponents to U.S. military action in Iraq since the days when the Bush administration initiated invasion of the country was former Representative Ron Paul. Though now retired from Congress, Paul continues to make his views known. On September 15th, a news commentator, Ern Odd of RT, asked Paul, should the president take on ISIS in Iraq? I mean, does ISIS represent a clear and present danger to America? Paul replied, no, absolutely not. It's a foolish thing. It was foolish when we got involved in 1990-91. It was foolish in 2003. We expanded and invaded Iraq, and the bombing between killings of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. It's time to quit and time to say that it's not working. It would say it's a bad idea. It's bad for our national sovereignty. It doesn't make us safer. It makes us more dangerous. It's very costly. I set the stage for undermining of our civil liberties at home. Paul also presented his recommendation to end the ISIS threat. If you don't like ISIS, just walk away, and Syria and Iran will take care of them. They'll get rid of the radicals just as Saddam Hussein did. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq when Hussein was president, and there is no Al-Qaeda in Iran. Yep, I have to agree with Congressman Paul on that one, former congressman. And we do need to stay out of these affairs and stop funding these bastards of ISIS and ISIL. Because I know for a fact it is being funded by the Western nations, especially the United States and Britain, possibly Israel and Saudi Arabia. And one thing you gotta look at too, if you see some of the photos, because there's certain flags that the ISIS, like the group from ISIS, like to wave. They have those golden ridges around the object of the flags. If you see the golden ridges, look up, just say or examine British maritime law, because technically that's what it represents. So if it does have those golden ridges, who's actually funding them? All right, some foreign investors are doing it. Politically, doesn't matter, and that's one thing you have to really examine. Is it part of a global agenda? Absolutely. ISIS is nothing more than just a bunch of new world order pawns, as far as I'm concerned. And that's how I gotta look at that. And you know what? Stop funding these yahoos. Let Iraq and the Syrian people take care of it, because something like that's going on in Libya with Al Qaeda and other foreign entities. When the whole thing happened, when the United States and NATO, they overthrew Gaddafi, which I think was totally illegal and uncalled for, but I don't see people protesting that. I bet you if John McCain did that, people will have a foaming at the mouth at Cujo. I know I've probably repeated it in my past episodes, but that's how I really feel. Let's stay out of it. Let them take care of it. All right, and stop funding them. Period. If the people want to fund if these people want to fund them, or people want to be buddy with them, you know what? Like John McCain, you get your old geezly behind on the front line, you pathetic yahoo. You could take your CFR membership card with you. All right, that's enough said with that. Got a couple more here. This is from the sender. Came out yesterday. It's entitled Kerry's Pretentious Scolding of CODEPINK for Protesting Escalation of War in Iraq and Syria. Looks like there's another one here. Yeah, what the hell? Let's just read this here. And as it reads, Secretary of State John Kerry testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, which is ISIS, and President Barack Obama's plan to combat the group. However, before getting into his remark, he took a moment to address the pink-clad members of the peace group CODEPINK, because they were in the room holding pink signs with anti-war messages and greeted him with chants and words of protest as he entered the witness table. As I came in here, obviously we had some folks spoke out. I will start by saying that I understand dissent. I've lived it. That's how I first testified in front of this country in 1971. I spent two years protesting the policy, so I respect the right of CODEPINK to protest and use that right, Kerry said. But you know what? Kerry continued, I know something about how CODEPINK was started by women who were opposed to war, but who also thought that government's jobs is to take care of the people, to give them good health care, education, and good jobs. And if that's what you believe in, and I believe it is, then you ought to care about fighting ISIS. What a clown. Kerry added, because ISIS is killing and raping and mutilating women, and they believe women shouldn't have education, they sell off girls to be sex slaves to jihadists. There is no negotiation with ISIS. There is nothing to negotiate, and they're not offering anyone health care of any kind. They're not offering education of any kind. For a whole philosophy or idea or cult, they are cold-blooded killers, marauding across the Middle East, making a mockery of a peaceful religion. And that's precisely what we are building, a coalition to try to stop them from denying the women and the girls and the people of Iraq a very future yet they yearn for. And frankly, CODEPINK and a lot of other people need to stop and think about how you stop them and to deal with that, Kerry concluded. Oh, good grief. Yeah, another used car salesman who spoke. Except CODEPINK and other people opposed military action have considered what it would take to stop ISIS as why they oppose U.S. military intervention, even if done with a support of a coalition. We are deeply concerned about the people of Syria and Iraq and the threat to their safety that ISIS poses, but we know that U.S. military intervention in the region has historically been counterproductive. We especially saw this played out in the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq. Instead of relying on the U.S. military to solve the crisis, what need is a political and humanitarian solution to the crisis, not more violence. It is also rather brazen that faced with the protest, CODEPINK, Kerry was suddenly all concerned about the women of Iraq. He had multiple meetings with former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, and not once did he publicly address the abuse of women in Iraq's criminal justice system, which Human Rights Watch called the attention in a report in February, which is a PDF format on there. According to HRW, thousands of Iraqi women are imprisoned by the judicial system, plunged by torture and rampant corruption. Convictions are based on confessions obtained under torture and ill treatment. The women are threatened and suffer beatings. Trial proceedings are unfair and all fall short of international standards. Kerry expressed concern about sex slaves. It appears that security forces in Iraq used women they detained and imprisoned as their own sex slaves. Fatima Hussein, who had been documenting abuse of detainees in prison, was accused of alleged involvement in the murder of paramilitary brother and also marrying an Al-Qaeda member. She was physically and sexually tortured. A man she identified as Colonel Ghazi blindfolded her and tied to her column. She was electrocuted with an electric baton. Her feet and back were hit with a cable. Her hair was pulled. She was tied naked to a column. Wow. Cigarettes were extinguished on her body. She was later handcuffed to a bed and forced to give oral sex. Then, with blood all over her, she was raped 3 times, and Ghazi would relax, have a cigarette, and put out on her buttocks, then start violating her again. As HRW explained, the insecurity created by the U.S.-led 2003 occupy of Iraq, followed by sectarian strife that engulfed the country, further eroded women's rights. Human Rights Watch documented a wave of sexual violence and abductions against women in Baghdad following the invasion. Women and girls told Human Rights Watch that insecurity and fear of rape and abduction kept them in their homes, out of school, and away from work. This is what CODEPINK and other people fear and why they are so hesitant to support military escalation. Yet the Obama administration stood by Maliki and his government and were mostly silent as officials in his criminal justice system barbarically engaged in rape and torture of women who were complicit when faced with evidence of rape and torture by Iraqi security forces. Kerry naively raised the fact that the group is interested in the government providing people with jobs, healthcare, and education without realizing that is exactly what could be motivating their opposition. They would rather see funds that will go toward war go into jobs, healthcare, and education. Plus, what is this pretentious nonsense about living descent? Like it's some phase he outgrew or misfortune he went through decades ago. It is also remarkable that he talked about his past, speaking out against the Vietnam War when he wants to publicly shame activists, but was a coward and ran from his past when he was campaigning for the president against President George W. Bush in 2004. Dissenting against the war was fashionable for Kerry until it threatened his future as a politician, and now Kerry is talking about arming and equipping thousands of Syrian rebels who will be trained by Saudi Arabia, his bastion of dignity, equality, and justice for women, then go off to fight ISIS then. Hold on here.